At the hospital. The smiling nurse walked in and asked, "How are you feeling today, Tyson?" Tyson smiled and replied, "Having the most beautiful nurse in the hospital taking care of him, of course I'm fine." The nurse who was complimented felt even more excited and said, "Oh my god, you make me fall in love with you. Tyson looks like a player, right?" Tyson heard that and exclaimed, "Can't you hide it from me?" The female nurse burst out laughing when she heard that. Tyson saw that the nurse was so cute and enjoyed teasing a few words. He winked, pointed at the nurse, and said, "If you were 5 years younger, I would date you." The nurse replied shyly, knowing that she was flattering her sister, but it sounded really cool. Tyson suddenly said, "I ordered pizza," the nurse said in surprise. "Why?" Tyson looked at the nurse's blank face and smiled and said she probably wanted something to eat as well. The nurse smiled and leaned close to Tyson and said, "Tyson is so thoughtful." Hearing such compliments, Tyson became even more proud. Crossing his arms and saying, "You're not just thoughtful." At this time, the nurse looked even more surprised at the boy. Tyson looked at the nurse's lovely face and said, "I also have a lot of money, a lot of money." The nurse was surprised and couldn't believe it and asked if it was true. "That's right, I'm waiting, please confess your love to me." The nurse smiled and patted his head, "It must have been a lot of money, look, money is everything to you." Having said that, there was something he needed to do. So the nurse told Tyson to stop playing games and just rest. "Thank you for the pizza." Hearing that, Tyson said sadly, "It's not a game." The nurse laughed and Tyson sat there dumbfounded. She didn't believe that she was right. No one would have expected it. Tyson sat at the table and turned on the computer. A series of data charts immediately appeared on the computer screen. Sitting in front of the computer screen, Tyson's eyes were not bright with excitement. Today's trading volume is 10 billion, the profit alone is already huge. His hand continued to control the computer mouse. Tyson smiled and looked at the screen with a maximum capital capacity of 20 billion. Tyson's eyes changed. Tyson turned around and put his feet on the ground. Who would believe that a high school student could invest that much money, hee. Tyson stood in front of the hospital balcony, his whole body covered with a cold aura. The recent commotion, without the doctor's permission, no one is allowed to visit this place, which has become an ideal place. Looking at the whole city of Tyson, I have to say, it's so beautiful. He thought to himself at this moment. The disciplinary committee is in a stir here. There are many reasons why I hate having to study in the same school as you lowly people. When the principal heard him say that, he sweated nervously. Hong Sung-hyun was surrounded by a group of reporters still smiling and saying, "I hate the smell of someone who eats kimchi for breakfast. I hate the bean residue in your brains too, you poor people who pollute my eyes." Another voice rang out, "Why do you keep bullying me and my weak classmates?" The head of the management department heard this and was stunned. Hearing this, angry eyes looked towards the man who beat his friends and stole money. Which is very evil. But we're still friends. Your father, lawyer Hong Jang-hyuk, is a member of the city council and knows you live like this. What will your father think? The man was startled when he heard this name. What is it? Hong Sung-hyun said arrogantly, "I don't need you to worry. You said it already. As for the lowly people, trample them until they can't raise their heads anymore." The whole council said with grey faces, "Hong Jang-hyuk." The boy in the screen continued, "So you rely on your father's position to bully others." Hong Sung-hyun curled his lips and smiled contemptuously. "Of course, the principal's son and the head of the management department are both my old man's acquaintances. As long as he gave away the money, everything would be fine, haha." The head of the management department heard that and his mouth opened in surprise. "What? Why is my name in here?" In the room, the brown-haired man and Tyson silently exchanged glances. The brown-haired man said coldly, "How much do you want me to do it?" Tyson just looked at him silently at this time. A moment later, he spoke up and stomped on them. Suddenly the sound of pounding the table echoed. What is he shouting so loudly? The manager's face was dark as he stood in front of the computer screen. As each day rushes by, the story goes further and further. The phone rang and he angrily shouted at Alo. Suddenly the manager's voice softened. What's wrong with Dad? What's the matter with you calling at this hour?" From the phone came a sound of scolding. The guy was uneducated. "I knew you'd cause trouble. You goddamn bastard. Just wait there, I'll come to your school right now." Holding the disconnected phone, he fell into contemplation. His face was indescribably listless. The news spread extremely widely. Netizens are more excited than ever. At a building where Hong Jang-hyuk is staying. This case will be quickly investigated and clarified. Hong Jang-hyuk. As soon as they saw him coming out, the press surrounded him. "Is it true that you put pressure on the prosecutor and the police? Please tell me." Hong Jang-hyuk bowed his head and said, "Sorry for the trouble I caused." Hong Jang-hyuk left his city council seat because of public criticism. Park Dong-suk bowed low and said, "I'm really ashamed." Two female employees outside whispered, manager Park Dong-suk and the inspector were both fired. And the chief prosecutor was also dismissed. The sky today is extremely blue. The bus leisurely drove on the road. Tyson put on his headphones and went out, thinking that everything was settled peacefully. Thanks to the power of money. What a beautiful world. Ah. His eyes met Lee Yaren. The whole girl standing in front of the sunlight is so beautiful. Tyson looked bewildered. Yes, this life is worth living, you must know. On the bus, Jang Tyson held out his hand and said, "Give me my bag." Turns out he was talking to the school's beauty queen, whose name is Lee Yaren. Hearing Jang Tyson say that, she suddenly replied, "Why?" The beauty queen looked at Jang Taeson's side, smiled brightly and said, "Give it to me, I'll keep it for you." Lee Yaren shyly replied, "It's okay, I can wear it." The two girls behind Yaren didn't say anything, thinking to themselves, another dog meal. Jang Tyson still held out his hand and said warmly, "It looks heavy, and I don't have many belongings, so it's convenient to keep." Lee Yaren silently said, "Who is it, mom?" "So handsome." She quickly thanked Jang Tyson, then, "Thank you." Lee Yaren gave the bag to Jang Tyson and he happily accepted it. The bus remained like that, continuing to move. A moment later, the beauty queen with a worried expression turned to ask Jang Tyson, "Are you okay?" Right now, Jang Tyson has to use one to keep a bunch of other people's belongings around him. Not only Lee Yaren but many people's belongings are also placed on his body. Jang Tyson smiled shyly and replied, "I'm fine." Helping each other is normal. He thinks no matter how old a man is, when he meets his first love he becomes stupid. Lee Yaren fiercely looked at the two girls who brought those things to Jang Tyson, silently saying, "These girls, over there." The two girls are still enjoying themselves, smiling from ear to ear because someone is holding the things for them. Jang Tyson saw Lee Yaren looking at the other two girls like that and felt helpless. Jang Tyson suddenly spoke to clear the atmosphere at that time. "My name is Jang Tyson." Lee Yaren suddenly turned and replied, "Huh." He hugged the pile of things and said loudly, "My name is Jang Tyson." Then, he shyly looked out the window. Lee Yaren's face couldn't hide her surprise, "So her name is Jang Tyson." Jang Tyson pulled out the headphones from his bag and put them on his ears. He connected it to his phone and began to immerse himself in music. Lee Yaren whispered, "He is a male student at Jangju School. He started riding the bus with me last year. He looks very self-conscious, his shoulders are always sagging. He was like that before summer vacation." Arriving there, Lee Yaren got out of the car but still looked back at Jang Tyson and thought, "He's changed so much." The two girls from earlier said loudly, "Lee Yaren, what are you doing?" "We're going to be late." Lee Yaren was startled and quickly replied, "Okay." Scene changed to Jangju High School. There is a loud voice, "Aha, Jang Tyson." Turns out it was Disan. He jumped up and tried to jump into Jang Taeson's body in front of the scared eyes of everyone around. Disan waved his hand to hit but Jang Tyson could easily dodge. Disan shouted, "You idiot, discharged right at the exam time." Hyeoncheol joined the group and raised his hand to attack but Tyson was still able to dodge. Hyeoncheol said, "If it were me, I would have hit at the hospital." Do-young also attacked but this time Jang Tyson couldn't avoid it and let out a cry and cough. All three of them howled. Did they get the nurse's number yet? Didn't they dare show their face yet? Jang Tyson could only hold his head helplessly and say, "Let me go." The whole group surrounded him and teased him. It was because of his face that he was shocked. "I'll spare you this time. Good luck to you, son." Jang Taeson's clothes were tattered. He cried and laughed, saying, "Thank you, brothers." He whispered, normally people would think that friendship and love are expressed through words. "Oh my brothers." All four of Jang Taeson's friends looked at him and smiled. The voice echoed throughout the hallway asking, "Have you studied for the exam?" At this time, Teacher Kim was present in the class. He said, "Second year there are 5 general education classes. In the last exam, our class ranked last. This time, are you going to make him look bad again?" Teacher Kim warmly looked at Jang Tyson and asked about his health. "Are you feeling better yet, Tyson?" Jang Tyson happily replied, "I'm fine." He smiled and said, "I'm so excited, it's all thanks to the teacher." Teacher Kim smiled gently at Jang Tyson. Jang Tyson also smiled back at the teacher as if silently thanking the teacher for helping him. After a while, Teacher Kim said, "The class is over." The teacher happily left the class, but did not forget to say good luck to everyone on their exams. He also did not forget to warn his students that if they do not seize this opportunity, they will not have time to regret it later. Jang Tyson looked at Teacher Kim who was leaving the classroom. He thought to himself, "Only the teacher and I understand that sentence clearly." Jang Tyson thought once he stepped out into society, we will be harshly screened. From background, academic degree to other standards. Looking at the exam paper, Jang Tyson was so surprised that he was speechless. Because it was during exam time, the space was quiet, only Jang Tyson silently called out, "Oh my god." Jang Tyson smirked because from the moment he saw the test, he couldn't help but laugh. Jang Tyson also did his homework with a very confident look and secretly said, "How can you be so easy?" Once again, they met on that same bus. He took out a bar of chocolate and said, "Give it to me, I've been waiting for days to give it to you." Seeing the chocolate bar, Lee Yaren couldn't hide the surprise on her face. She said, "Huh." Jang Tyson happily replied, "I'm about to take the university entrance exam, sugar is very good for short-term memory." 3 female students in the same class as Lee Yaren showed jealous faces. Mijin said, "Oh, he likes Yaren." Na Young also said, "She's so pretty." Another girl also said, "I also like Sokola Hicks Hicks." Lee Yaren shyly said, "Thank you, Jang Tyson." "Thank you." Jang Tyson smiled, said, "I'm a senior, just talk to me freely, I'm a second year." He secretly said, "No one has ever flirted with me, that's right, they absolutely don't know that there is someone behind them," with an angry, frowning face. He frowned and looked at Jang Tyson and said, "What is this, that brat?" Jang Tyson turned to ask Lee Yaren, "Can you take the exam?" She stammered, "Well." Lee Yaren smiled shyly and asked Jang Tyson, "What about you?" "I'm fine," Jang Tyson replied. Lee Yaren continued, "Really, look at you, you must have a very high score." Jang Tyson didn't say anything but smiled widely, seemingly very proud of his exam. Lee Yaren was surprised and asked, "Are you really tall?" Jang Tyson humbly replied that you are the person with the highest achievements at Jangju Girls' School, right, and me too. The girls sitting in the next row admired him and said, "Oh my gosh, he's top of the whole school, impeccable." Mijin also complimented him. "He's handsome and also good at studying." Jang Tyson smiled and humbly said, "Maybe the teacher made the test too easy." Lee Yaren showed surprise clearly on her face. Jang Tyson took out his phone and said, "Do you use your phone? Please give me your number. I will text you every day to cheer you up, help you happily take your college entrance exam." Lee Yaren stammered out the phone number, 017-327. Jang Tyson quickly entered her phone number and saved her name in the contact list as Lee Yaren. They exchanged phone numbers. Na Young replied, "Really?" The other girls were also very surprised because they didn't think that Lee Yaren would give Jang Tyson her phone number. The girl standing near Lee Yaren turned to look and couldn't hide her surprise. After asking for Lee Yaren's phone number, Jang Tyson looked very satisfied and happily looked out the window. Lee Yaren also looked at Jang Tyson with gentle eyes. When he arrived, Jang Tyson waved goodbye to Lee Yaren and her friends. However, Lee Yaren did not say hello back but blushed and felt embarrassed. The bus continues to run to the next destination. Sitting in the car, Jang Tyson couldn't hide his joy and shouted, "Yahoo!" Jang Tyson looked at his contacts and saw the name Lee Yaren, so he smiled. Jang Tyson was immersed in joy when someone shouted, "Hey kid!" Turned around and saw 3 guys who looked very thuggish saying, "Come here." Jang Tyson said in surprise, "Huh. That guy looks very brazen, his face is angry and he shouts loudly, 'Bradley, didn't you hear what your brother said? I told you to come here.'" Turns out they were the bullies in the Shreem Wrestling Club. He pointed straight at Jang Tyson and said loudly, "I told you to come here, that rat." That name was Choi Hyuk-kwon. Jang Tyson nervously turned around and looked, thinking, it seems like he has been in the news. Tyson started walking slowly towards that bully's place. Jang Tyson walked over and put his hands on the chair looking very cool. The bully frowned and grimaced because he didn't think Tyson would have the guts to step forward. Jang Tyson raised his eyes and looked at Choi Hyuk-kwon with a disdainful expression and said, "It's me, is there anything?" After hearing that, Choi Hyuk-kwon was a little shy and shouted. "You," the bully next to you shouted loudly, "This guy, are you crazy?" He turned to Hyuk-kwon and shouted, "Hyuk-kwon, what to do now? Beat her to death." At this moment Hyuk-kwon was in a cold sweat, unable to say anything. Then he showed a hungry look and said, "Give me Yaren's phone number, she's my type." Jang Tyson smirked, whispering, "What about your taste?" He smiled and said, "I don't like it, what's the matter?" Hearing this, Hyuk-kwon's face changed. He shouted angrily, "What do you say, you dog?" He shouted even louder and said, "Yaren is mine." Jang Tyson listened to him shouting without being moved and replied, "Hearing you bark hurts my ears." Hearing that, Hyuk-kwon was a little excited and shouted, "You." There was a guy who couldn't keep calm and rushed out, saying, "Mom, do you want to die?" Jang Tyson saw it out of the corner of his eye and immediately raised his hand to block the thug's fist. He grabbed that guy's hand and threw him into the air. Then he threw him down on the ground. Fat Hyuk-kwon was very angry but was shy because he saw the person next to him was knocked down. Suddenly Jang Tyson laughed again and said, "What are you guys doing so stressed? You just finished your midterm exam." He laughed loudly and said, "Forgive me. To you guys, competing is nothing, but to me, it's very important." Hearing this, every guy's face turned black as ink. I didn't expect Jang Tyson would dare to insult him like that. Jang Tyson smiled brightly, picked up the guy who was defeated earlier and said, if you want to continue fighting, choose a quieter day. He looked at me and said, guys, please understand. Jang Taezon's words just now probably offended Hyukwon. He was so angry that all the veins on his face were exposed, his mouth was screaming loudly, shut up right now, or I'll break your eyebrows right now. Hearing such a loud noise, the driver quickly stepped on the brake. The bus braked suddenly, the driver shouted down, what's wrong with the kids down there? The driver looked in the mirror and saw Jang Tyson bowing his head with the other two guys. He asked, what's going on? Jang Tyson finally spoke up, I'm sorry for making noise. The two thugs behind looked at Jang Tyson with angry expressions and said, this guy. Jang Tyson hung his head and thought, maybe they don't know. My dream is to become a model citizen. I want to live peacefully from day to day. Buy a few buildings in Gangnam to earn pocket money, build a few villas on Jeju Island for summer vacation, and when I have enough time, go shopping for another island. Whoever dares to interfere with my dream, I will make him look bad. Scene changed to Jangju High School. It was lunchtime, and a woman said, enjoy your meal. Today's school menu is a bit simple and frugal, with only bean paste soup and a few side dishes. Seeing that, Daesun felt dissatisfied and said, what's wrong? Bong-suk replied. My son's rice is even more delicious. Jang Tyson looked at the tray of food without saying a word. Jang Tyson looked disappointedly at the nutritionist. She said, you guys should eat a lot, soybean soup is very good for your health, did you know? She continued, it was very difficult to get these soybeans. Rumor has it that the person who made this lunch worse than dog rice was the director's lover. Suddenly Jang Tyson remembered, with his own eyes he saw her put a few boxes of cheap bean paste into the truck. Remembering this, he decided to put down his spoon and not eat anymore. This caught the nutritionist's attention. She looked towards Jang Tyson and said, huh. Jang Tyson started to stand up and put away his rice tray. The nutritionist looked at him and said, oh, handsome male student. Why is there so much food? If you waste it, you will be punished by the king of hell. Did you know? Tyson didn't seem to care much and glanced at her face. He poured the leftover food into the container and said, but it's okay to be alive. She sounded angry and spoke loudly, of course, but speaking that way to a beautiful woman like you is impolite, you know. So while you're still alive, try being punished once. You don't have to wait until you die, Jang Tyson replied. This time she really lost patience. She shouted loudly, what, have you finished talking yet? Jang Tyson turned his head to look at her with cold eyes. He asked, how is the director? She was startled as if she had been told something right in her heart and quickly said, who are you? Scene transitioned to the director's office. Knowing someone was coming, he said, come in. He put food in his mouth and chewed it. Seeing Jang Tyson coming, he asked, how can I help you, mister? Tyson? He gave a friendly smile and said, don't be shy, just say it. Jang Tyson said loudly, I want to eat meat. Not believing his ears, he asked again, do you eat meat? The director said somewhat awkwardly, really? Do you want to eat meat? Jang Tyson turned to continue speaking, but, not just me, everyone too. He said with a serious face, the director's lover is a nutritionist. After listening, the director just looked at Jang Tyson and said nothing. Jang Tyson continued, but for the past year, the school's lunch has been worse than dog rice. The students here all pay 3,500 won for each meal. Hearing this, the director thought to himself, dog rice. Tyson said, in other schools, there are at least 3 days a week where you can eat meat. There is no school in this world that allows students, who have to pay for rice, to eat soybeans. Sir, this behavior is called blocking. Hearing this, the director was extremely surprised. His hands clutched the chair. Jang Tyson firmly said that he would like you to file a complaint with the police. After speaking, Jang Tyson stood up and said, I'm sorry. The director said, hey Tyson. The director said with a very serious expression, no matter how immature you are, you still have to consider your words. Jang Tyson smiled shyly and replied, I was just recounting an incident that you already knew. The space suddenly became quiet and awkward. The two people looked at each other without knowing what to say. After leaving the director's office, Jang Tyson thought, I spent 500 million to settle Hong Sun Won, although working with a reputable law firm is very expensive, but they resolved it very smoothly. Jang Tyson glanced into the room and thought, when the time is right, I can mess up this school again. The director's voice was very loud. It could be heard outside, he said, where is Mr. Park? Quickly call the principal and the vice principal will be here immediately. Tyson walked quietly, whispering, I only want one thing now, when the quality of school rice is worse than dog food. Jang Tyson smiled, my purpose is very clear, isn't it? The scene changes again to a moonlit night, cloudy, but without a single star. On the table is a glass of wine being refilled. There was a guy holding a bottle of wine about to pour more and said, Sir. His face was angry and sharp, he said, bury it. The big brother sipped a glass of wine and said, let's solve this discreetly. The junior raised the bottle of wine with both hands and respectfully offered it to their big brother. That guy poured the wine and said that it wasn't just a matter of burying a high school kid. Looking at his big brother, he said with deep black eyes, there are many people who are eager to join our organization. A sinister smile appeared on the cruel face of his junior, if he only looked back. The big brother spoke emotionlessly to his junior as if he didn't care what he said, if you take care of it well, I'll reward you with double. Immediately accompanied by the junior's joy and a loud shout, thank you, boss. His hands were clenched under the table, trembling. The big brother thought, the problem was only money. So angry that all the wrinkles on his face appeared, he trembled and called out Jang Taezon's name. He shouted loudly and roared angrily, I will definitely kill you. Outside, the waiters, waitresses and other customers expressed surprise and fear when they heard that scream. The scene changes to the school. And immediately a call for Jang Tyson rings out. Accompanying that was the scene of the teacher opening the door along with his rapid breathing. Jang Tyson sat on the desk, both hands clasped together, suddenly asked the teacher, what's wrong? The teacher with a panicked face and sweat pouring down asked, what did you do? He held the scoreboard high in front of him with the numbers appearing. The teacher shouted loudly as he pointed at Jang Taezon's score. Why did he get a perfect score? Next to him were two friends with surprised looks of disbelief. The whole class was silent as if witnessing something they had never seen in their life. Haunchul was surprised. What? Tyson got a perfect score, Du Young even called. He's definitely cheating, teacher. Everyone is surprised, angry, and jealous. Please check it out. The teacher smiled with satisfaction. He saw that the whole class was on his side. He held out his hand to the side as if reluctantly. Well, I guess you have to explain to everyone. Jang Tyson lowered his head, thought for a moment and then said, there is no other way. While still cursing his friends in his mind, you monkeys, you guys should just try to die and come back to life. Jang Taezon's teacher and friends were silent as if waiting for something. Jang Tyson faltered, today, you. He smiled, pointed to the sky as if he had found a solution. He frightened the whole class with the following sentence to the above sentence. He would invite the whole class to eat pizza. Teacher, Haunchul, Du Young and the crowd behind were very angry. The atmosphere was visibly gloomy. But no, Jang Tyson raised his second finger at the same time, not yet, there's more. I will always be on the internet. Which makes my classmates clearly surprised and happy. The teacher seemed to have suspected something from the reluctant expressions on Haunchul and Du Young's faces that made him unable to close his mouth. He looked around at the whole class who were happy and shouting. Haunchul said, Tyson is actually very smart, teacher. Du Young laughed and said, yes, and talking about diligence, Tyson is second, no one dares to be first. Bong Suk pointed at his head, on the internet said, after a brain concussion. People will become more alert, teacher. Du Young is like taking heart, I believe in you, brother. Jang Tyson held out his hands to the sides, smiling happily with countless voices shouting his name behind him, you guys have confirmed it for me, teacher. The teacher couldn't do anything else, he let it go this time and thought about it, you easygoing kids. A while later, in the school cafeteria, Haunchul and Young Suk looked like they couldn't believe their eyes. A whole tray of rich rice, filled with delicious-looking dishes including a huge chicken. Jangju School's nutritionist was confused, I'm sorry, isn't that enough? Next time, I'll learn from experience. The school returned to its original peaceful state after the mood breaker disappeared, and the students appeared happy and thanked her profusely. Not only does it have meat, but the meal also includes high-quality local agricultural products. The traders at the market wholeheartedly thank us for purchasing ingredients to cook for more than 1,500 students every day. The scene changes to a certain pizza shop. Taezon's entire class gathered at the counter and ordered without any order. Auntie, please give us a super large pizza, the bigger the better. The students were jostling. No one was willing to yield to anyone else, trying to get their turn first. Get it for me first, auntie, get it for me first. The sales lady asked curiously, did you guys have a fun time? Tyson replied, there is someone at the top of the table. Auntie, she asked again, Jang Tyson. Haunchul was surprised, he knew Tyson anyway. She replied that she heard that thanks to Tyson, the school was peaceful. Her children also studied in Jiangju. Where was Tyson? Tyson smiled, turned to face a guy sitting cross-legged, over there. Tyson seemed to realize those gazes were directed at him. He smiled friendly and said hello, aunt. After that smile, the girls in the distance seemed captivated. Constantly thinking, Mom, he's so handsome. The sales lady wondered if I could pay in full. Tyson raised his hand to signal as if he wanted everyone to feel secure, smiling from ear to ear. Carefree, he also thought with a very confident attitude, today he made more than $1 billion. From behind Tyson came a greeting. He turned around with a surprised look and could only give a cursory response to that greeting. A girl with ear-length blonde hair in a brown uniform appeared. You're a second-year student, right? That beautiful girl put her hands on her hips and asked. Do you have a phone? A beautiful beauty, shiny blonde hair, emerald eyes and a sharp face with lovely small lips. Tyson calmly raised his hand first and said, sorry but I have an audience. His friends were very surprised and jealous. This Jang Tyson is so good, so jealous. She asked him back, saying that he was just an object, so that meant he didn't have a girlfriend, right? Tyson didn't seem to hear that question. He even asked her back, what? That beautiful girl smiled. A gorgeous, satisfied smile, so it wasn't there yet. She boldly leaned closer to Tyson. So give me your phone number, making him confused. All he could do was blurt out, what? Tyson couldn't sit still with the girl's words, gestures, and actions. He thought, what's wrong with this girl, she's so embarrassing. He explained hesitantly. Pointing continuously, smiling awkwardly, he thought doing so would be very unfair to that person. Even though it was an unrequited love, he still had to be loyal. That blonde girl seemed interested in Tyson. He was so interesting. Tyson thought, wondering where he had seen this bold girl before. Suddenly his eyes glanced at the name tag, Kim Syrian. Wait, Kim Syrian, Syrian. Taeson's eyes were wide open, his mouth couldn't close, he was shaking as if he was witnessing something he had never seen in his life. He couldn't believe his eyes anymore, he wanted to jump up and down. Could it be that it was Kim Syrian? A beautiful figure appeared in his memory. She was a top star from her hometown, a representative idol for Korea. Kim Syrian, the center and representative face of the group, FOB, is the most talented female idol in K-pop. In my memory is the image of the FOB group performing under stage lights with countless cameras. Returning to reality, the scene was filled with jealousy from Taeson's 4 friends. I knew this idiot right away, I wanted to punch him so much. Tyson couldn't say anything when in front of him was the girl who would become an idol in the future. Oh my god, is this real or a dream? Syrian smiled, crossed her arms and asked, how long are you planning on making me wait? He was embarrassed, he could only hum in response to the word with continuous thoughts in his head. It's Kim Syrian, mum. Tyson swallowed his saliva, his lips were sweaty. His body motionless. Suddenly, from the side, there was a voice calling his name intermittently. As if surprised to see him there. Lee Yaren appeared with surprise evident on her face along with Taeson's mouth open. She witnessed the whole thing as if she couldn't believe her eyes. Tyson panicked and thought, why is this happening now? Syrian called Senior Yaren calmly like it was nothing. Tyson couldn't keep calm when he heard that anymore, he panicked, his eyes opened wide and sweat drenched his face when he heard that, Sister Yaren. Yaren kept muttering, thinking about Tyson texting her all the time. She thought it was mostly just greetings and joking. Yaren was stunned, speechless, only the words Jang and Tyson could come out of her small mouth, she thought. But when we faced each other, I unconsciously called his name. Suddenly 2 of Yaren's friends seemed to pull her back to reality by asking, oh my god, we're reunited again, are your acquaintances? Those 2 girls kept praising that Tyson was handsome and had a very good body. Tyson was the only one standing there, absent-mindedly, with his hands hanging down. Calling out the name of someone familiar to him very softly, Yaren. Taeson's friends were so jealous, bastard Tyson, he must have eaten something good during summer break. Suddenly a guy seemed to realize something, pointed at Yaren and said, I know her, she's the student with the highest score at Jangju Girls' School, a 3rd-year student. Tyson is also the one who got perfect scores in our school, they are not scores that we can reach, someone said. Tyson realized he was a bit rude, he put his hand to his mouth. Cleared his throat, ahem, thinking not to be nervous, to be natural. He smiled brightly. The sunlight from the window made him even more dazzling, he confidently asked Yaren. Are you coming to eat pizza? Yaren was embarrassed, didn't dare to look directly at Tyson, shyly answered, yes, you guys just asked me to hang on. Tyson was surprised and asked, dear friend. Yaren's 2 friends quickly interrupted, making Yaren quite confused. The girl on the left with short hair around her neck said, hello, I'm Yaren's friend. Just call me Young, and the girl on the right with I introduced myself with my hair styled in one eye, and I was the hottest girl in school, Ciora. Tyson was confused and replied, hello ladies. Young and Ciora quickly went to both sides of Tyson and said a few things about their close friend Yaren. Her midterm score was really high, so we told her she wanted it, but we didn't expect Yaren to know a queen, this is how handsome he is. Young poked Taeson's body with his hand, and at the same time gave a sinister smile, jokingly asking. He's just a junior, right? Ciora seemed to have an epiphany, understood something. Happily shouted loudly, got it, it's Yaren Senior, right? She leaned over to Taeson's right side, excitedly asking as if very confidently, is your crush Yaren, leaving Tyson with his mouth that can't be closed, so big that he can fit the whole box in. Yaren was so surprised that he couldn't say anything anymore, his eyes were an O, his mouth was an A, his soul seemed to hang on a cloud. Sayori unelbowed Taezon's body as if to remind him to calm down and not show it so clearly. Followed by Taezon's coughing sound. All the students at the pizza shop were dumbfounded. Yerin lowered her face, her mouth not opening, her eyes hidden deep under her hair, calling Seirin. Seirin was happy, obedient, nodded and replied, "Yes ma'am." The gloomy atmosphere covered Yerin. She asked, "Are you very close to Tyson?" Seirin answered confidently and honestly, her blue eyes looking straight at Yerin. "No, I just met him for the first time." "Is it really the first time?" Yerin asked. Behind Seirin was Tyson with a reluctant smile, adjusting his tie to ease his awkwardness. Then suddenly Seirin said, "Yes, but the photo is my type." I graded the photo, that made Tyson sweat, his mouth open even wider than before. Seirin put his two hands, one hand near Taezon's head, one hand below Taezon's feet, as if measuring his height, squinting his eyes while saying, "He's already handsome. He's also good at studying, but don't like it." Tyson was startled, speechless with doubt behind Seirin's satisfied smile. "What's wrong with this girl?" "Seeing everything in my eyes." Taezon's friends cried bitterly, "This bastard Tyson, so jealous." Yerin and Seirin looked at each other, like two women fighting for the man of their lives. The difference is, Seirin is smiling happily, without any discomfort, while Yerin is gloomy, looking down. Her face does not show any smile. Suddenly Yerin raised her face, like an angel descending to earth with a bit of radiant sunlight. She smiled brightly. "I thought so too." Taezon's eyes were in an O shape, his mouth was in an A shape. He didn't know what else to say. As for Seirin, she was surprised because it was like she saw another Yerin. The crowd of boys around looked at the two beautiful, talented, perfect girls with perfect bodies who were affirming that they had feelings for Tyson and felt bored and jealous, not just one but even two ladies. Yerin quickly walked to Taezon's side like a lover, like marking sovereignty with a beautiful and innocent smile, making Tyson look at her in bewilderment as if witnessing a completely different person. Seirin said in surprise. "Seirin is quite good." She also quickly walked in front of Tyson, facing Yerin. Tyson didn't understand what she was doing. Seirin passed by Yerin and looked at each other like bitter rivals. Seirin suddenly stopped, turned her back to Yerin, confidently smiled and asked, "But Seirin will play fair, right?" Yerin suddenly felt embarrassed, shyly opened her eyes, thinking about it. Tyson couldn't stand it anymore when he saw it. He wanted to scream. "What day is today?" Seirin stopped again, turned to face Tyson as if she wanted to ask something more. She shouted loudly, asking without any hesitation, "Tyson, Yerin, Seirin has your phone number, right?" It surprised both of them. Tyson didn't expect that. "What?" Seirin walked up and questioned. "Then you also have to give me your phone number, isn't that fair?" Seirin tilted her head and smiled brightly, crossing her fingers together, "Playing nice like that?" "Oh God above," Tyson with a reluctant face. Suddenly Yerin said, "Just take Tyson," which surprised him even more. "Why?" Seirin nodded in agreement, feeling that Yerin's actions were right. Tyson stood between the two girls confused, listening to Yerin's words, "Give her your number." Tyson thought about the scene of the two girls in front of him baring their fangs and claws facing each other, thinking, is this a legendary battle of women's honor? He was reeling. Thinking, crazy. Finally, Tyson decisively held out his hand, "Giving me my phone." To his right while he was dialing his phone number into Seirin's phone, Yerin seriously looked towards his opponent. The opponent lost his life, and pondered about something. Seirin looked at Tyson entering the phone number and felt a little embarrassed, just a little, but it showed on her face. Tyson seemed to have thought it through. He happily thought, "To be honest, I'm as happy as being on top of the world. The drama between us will explode from now on and it will definitely have a very interesting ending." He beeped the call button on Seirin's phone. His friends, still jealous as before, but now, mixed with a bit of pride and admiration, followed Tyson. He thought, this development is not so bad. On the left is my first love, on the other side is a future superstar. Two beautiful and talented girls that cannot be faulted. The crowd roared in anger again, calling Jang Taezon's name with all their anger and jealousy. "Jang Tyson, you bastard." Right nearby was a girl who secretly called someone, bewildered and holding her phone in both hands, announcing that Yerin seemed to have dumped Tyson. Yes, she knew right away. Turned to a scene of a martial arts school. A burly, big guy with curly hair was sitting with his back turned and received a phone call from somewhere. "Okay, don't worry. I'll treat you today, call everyone over, okay, hang up now." The coach was angry because that guy didn't practice but went out to answer the phone. "Hey, you didn't practice but did something." He walked up behind that guy and said, "Monkey, the coach calls so you have to answer," and at the same time that guy also stood up. The coach put his hand on the back of that big guy's shoulder, wondering, "Didn't you hear what I said?" when suddenly this guy roared in anger, blue veins appearing on his face. The big guy turned around and hugged the coach and flipped him down as if venting his anger on someone without caring about anything else. The coach was thrown onto the sand as if he was about to lose consciousness, screaming in pain. That guy stood up straight, eyes white, raised his voice as high as possible, roared at the top of his lungs, pouring out all his anger into the sound while his upper body was naked, the layer of fat on his body flowing down. I will kill you. Jang Tyson, a loud roar along with sweat and saliva flowing down. The big guy seemed to hit Jang Tyson to the bone. Tyson took everyone to the garage to see the car he bought for his father. The children widened their eyes in surprise and exclaimed in unison. Oh my god, you bought this for your father. After that, everyone went shopping together. Everyone carrying big bags and small bags, happily saying while carrying them, you two are the best. The father saw the children like that and said, oh my god, take it slow. Kids, Tyson immediately replied, it's okay, I've paid, Dad. After hearing this, everyone was surprised at how rich the second brother was. He winked, raised his finger to signal okay and exclaimed, if you have money, you have everything, okay? In the evening, a cool moonlit night in the heart of the city, the buildings had not yet turned off their lights. In a room of a building, there was the sound of Tyson's keyboard typing, he said as he typed. I love the keyboard that rattles in the room. In the room, Tyson was wearing a swimsuit. Concentrating on his work on the desk, he thought, I have left home and live independently, I also rarely go to school and completely control my time. At this time, he was flying high like a kite. Today I made a profit of more than 7 billion, he happily said. Tomorrow it will probably be up to 9 billion he. The stock market continued to explode. Market prices skyrocketed and one day, after finishing his work, he stood up and exclaimed. This is the life I should live, the life where money makes money. Tyson stood up to go out. Suddenly he stopped to think, but I haven't touched futures and options contracts yet. If I want to get involved in futures and options contracts, the principle will have to be changed one by one. He opened the door and walked out, happily encouraging himself, what a wonderful night. Actually, I wanted to wait until then, he told himself, he will wait for me. Tyson walked to the porch, leisurely breathed in the wind, thinking to himself, it's almost there. The crisis in the subprime mortgage market in 2007, the rapid increase in prices of foreign goods and a chaotic currency in the slow delivery market, Tyson contemplated the sky and silently resolved, I will wait for that moment. The next morning, a normal day at Tyson's school. After class ended, the school bell rang throughout the hallways. At this time, in Tyson's classroom, when everyone was leaving one by one, Tyson approached him and asked, hey, top of the class, are you going to go home? He was suddenly startled. School was back to normal. He stood up, picked up his bag and awkwardly said, yes, I'm home, hee. Tyson happily left. He was looking forward to it and wondered if he could go home and check how much he had earned. Returning to school wasn't as bad as I thought. He mingled with the students and left. Even though I hated studying, he happily hummed as he walked home. While walking very normally, suddenly, in the middle of the crowd, Jong-suk stopped with a dark face. Tyson didn't understand what happened. He almost bumped into Jong-suk. He asked, why did he suddenly stop? We almost collided, Jong-suk said in panic. Tyson, look. Turns out, in front of them were 5 thugs standing in the middle of the road. It seemed like the person they were targeting was Tyson. He seemed to recognize them and thought to himself, Choi Hyunkin's gang. He looked at them and calmly smiled and said, who are they? Just thugs. The dojong next to him was so scared that he was sweating and said, they are the guys from the industrial high school. On the other side of the group. At this moment the fat guy was squatting and asking his accomplices, is that him? The other person replied, yes. The fat guy seemed to have loaded what he needed to do. Calling out, hey Jang Tyson. Tyson calmly asked questions. Who is this brother? Do we know each other? The 2 kids next to him gasped in surprise when they saw Tyson dare to say that, trembling and calling out his name, Tyson. The guys on the other side laughed loudly when they heard that. Guys, haha, follow us quickly, you dog. Tyson was so helpless that he was speechless and then realized, that's right, I can't talk to you guys properly. Having said that, he seemed to want to solve it himself. So he turned around and told his friends, you guys should go home first. As soon as he finished speaking, Tyson realized that next to him was not only Dojong and Jang-suk but a whole group of people, 2 people larger than the other group. He was startled and confused and asked, when have we been here? There was a fuss. If we come along, will you treat him to pizza? Treat the internet to long life pizza. Then everyone decided to stay and help him. Tyson was so touched when he heard that, I know you guys love me. A moment later, when the high surface was about to descend the mountain. At a small alley corner of the street, the others aggressively brought Tyson in front of Choi Hyunkin, saying loudly, big brother, we brought Tyson. A guy on the boss's left still kept a calm expression as he looked at Tyson. The white-haired guy on the right chuckled as if he was planning something. The big fat guy sitting in the middle was the boss, surrounded by a group of juniors. All of whom looked towards Tyson. At this time, the boss also spoke up to welcome Tyson, who had finally arrived. The rat language, he cursed Tyson in front of his juniors. My juniors burst out laughing, ha ha ha. He frowned angrily and said, "Don't leave this place alive. This move won't work again." Tyson looks innocent but still doesn't forget to flirt. What's the point? Is he in love with a movie or what? His fake smiling face combined with his words looked very prestigious. His friends below were smiling to each other. Haha, so fat, haha. Choi Hyung-kwon angrily gritted his teeth and impulsively cursed, "I will kill you," while Tyson just calmly looked at him with a confident smile. Tyson's 7 brothers seem to be weaker in numbers but are still aggressively preparing to fight. The other group has an overwhelming numerical advantage. Suddenly he felt uneasy, thinking, this room is so strange. He rolled his eyes continuously, looking around, then realized something. He felt a very negative energy flow. Around him was like a battlefield, with dried blood everywhere, he thought to himself. After practicing martial arts, my body became very sensitive, I could feel everything. So it was quite annoying. Observed for a while, then he tried to persuade him to buy time. Smiled coldly and said, "You know what?" The thugs stood there watching him speak. What they were doing was an extremely serious act of violence. While being serious, Tyson suddenly burst out laughing. "Ha, there's still time to turn around, how long have I lived? This life is actually very short, living in this busy and pitiful life, why waste time on useless things, haha." Hearing what Tyson said, the old man gritted his teeth, and the juniors next to him added insult, saying, "Big brother, he must have just played with that toy, he has to adjust it really hard." Tyson seemed to be possessed by the divine law, reading out a series of laws to enlighten the thugs. According to Article 261 of the criminal law, organized or individual acts of violence, carrying dangerous weapons, causing injury or harming the health of others is considered a crime. The stupid thugs didn't understand anything and asked each other in confusion. What was going on, who knows, making the boss's face darken. Tyson confidently told Hyun-kan, "If I had a nosebleed, it would be a serious injury, the sentence would be at least a year in prison, your parents would have to come and beg me, not to mention having to pay for it. Treatment fees, moreover, I just had a concussion not long ago, if I get injured. I will have to be treated for half a year, if I stay in a VIP room, it will be very expensive." Hearing that, the thugs still showed no respect and simultaneously walked closer to Tyson. Hyun-kan took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. With sharp eyes he said, "Damn this guy, you're so innocent." He didn't panic at all but started to complain. "Oh my god, look at this, people who practice sports are addicted to cigarettes. Their heads are probably full of chubbins right now." Tyson's friends heard that and smiled at each other. Too embarrassed to become angry, the old man crushed his cigarette, then loudly ordered, "You guys, I will take care of that guy, give you the clowns in the back, and then the murderous juniors, don't aim at your prey." At this time, Tyson's brothers were a little scared when they saw there were so many of them. They were worried and cried out, "Hey, don't be like that." Tyson is like a deaf person who is not afraid of guns. With a senseless smile on his face he turned around and said, "I'm about to be taken care of now. I'm so scared, hee hee." The juniors on the other side started to raise their voices. "You go ahead and brag, we're still underage, no matter how heinous the crime is, just give up $1,000,000, cry and beg the judge, let's go home, you think you're the only one who's smart, huh?" Tyson smiled coldly and thought, that's why the law needs to be tightened. In Korea, underage criminals will not be convicted, so the number of victims of injustice continues to increase rapidly. Just wait and see, then dad will tear it apart and trample it under the ground, foot. Without hesitating for too long, that Hyun-kan shouted loudly to his juniors. "What are you waiting for? Beat their mothers to death." Having said that, the other guys, some holding sticks, some holding iron tips, shouted loudly like good heroes and rushed forward. Then the group of juniors holding iron rods rushed straight towards Tyson, as if wanting to give him a ticket to the west. The Tyson brothers' eyes widened in panic when they saw that. There was the iron bar. Tyson reacted, raised his hand to signal everyone and said, "Back away quickly." Suddenly, whether accidentally or intentionally, Tyson suddenly tripped and fell. Crying out in pain, "Ah!" The juniors were overwhelmed by the water, and when they saw him stumble and fall, they became even more aggressive. Everyone below was scared by you and called out your name, Tyson. At this moment, he had already jumped to the ground, sprawled out, watching the other guys rush towards him. Several of them jumped up, brandishing iron clubs at him. Tyson was scared at the last minute, his eyes widened and he thought, "I'm leaving." Suddenly, a front tooth, whether mine or the enemy's, flew out of his jaw, blood splattering. There were 2 men holding iron clubs, jumping up and swinging the clubs at Tyson. The rest also rushed forward at the same time. Tyson panicked, widened his eyes and exclaimed, "Leaving me alone." The other 2 guys smiled confidently, then slammed their sticks straight down. Suddenly, before those 2 guys could touch Tyson's hair, one of them grimaced in discomfort. Turns out, he was kicked straight in the face by the long-legged handsome man Tyson. His jaw was bleeding, he coughed. Unexpectedly, even though he fell down, he was still able to counterattack. Not only that, he also kicked out the other guy's front tooth, causing blood to splatter. He jumped into the sky like Superman and kicked him to the ground. The other people who witnessed this scene were a little panicked. You jumped up and punched the guy on the right. Drawing blood, then cursed, "You're making me scared, you're just playing the game." Then he turned around and gave the guy on the left a kick, causing him to vomit blood and curse, "Almost killing me." Tian knocked out a few guys and then stood proudly looking at the remaining guys with provocative eyes. "If you want, then jump in." He arrogantly stroked his nose and said, "Whatever you do, do it quickly, I'm hungry." Not being cool for a few seconds, he showed off again, then said. 5 Pearl Tai Chi. The young thugs were shocked to the core, gaping at the scene before them, unable to believe their eyes. Hyunkin was still stubborn, telling his juniors to continue fighting. Beat him to death, play whatever way he wanted. The juniors said yes, then rushed up simultaneously. He also didn't want to take the fight, so he ran forward and fought complacently. You idiots, in movies, has the main character ever been beaten up by thugs? After saying that, he shouted loudly, "Look at me." The first punch distorted the first guy's face, he choked and cried out. When the second punch was given to the second guy, he was no worse than the first guy. His face distorted and he exclaimed, "Ah." Tyson confidently said, "Now it's dad," then hit him consecutively, one punch at a time. These guys all had the same fate of blood from their noses and mouths. Finally, after defeating a few more guys, he loudly announced that his father was the main character of this territory. Tyson looked at the remaining guys and smiled coldly and said, "You guys dare to laugh at me over there again, I will deal with you all." Tyson's friends saw him beat up a few guys and were even more shocked than the others, exclaiming, "Oh my god." He kicked a guy in the stomach while kicking him. "Can he hit a little harder?" Then he ran towards the guys standing there looking at him, ran over and said, "What are you doing there?" Dad said to come. They were a bit panicked. One of them yelled and cursed, "No, let's fight the gang, let's play with him." Tyson burst out laughing, fighting the council, okay, let's all go." After that, they suffered the same consequences as the previous guys, they were all defeated. Blood splattered. He ended the fight with a jump and punch. Tyson landed safely in front of the boss, who was also scared and panicked. He opened his mouth and widened his eyes in disbelief, thinking to himself, who is this guy? His subordinates who were defeated were lying in piles as if they were about to be used as tributes to the boss. Tyson's friends were even more excited, enthusiastically cheering and stirring up the atmosphere. "Come to Tyson, wow, play it like a movie." Tyson saw his friends cheering enthusiastically, forgetting the important thing to do, so he sighed and said, "What are you guys doing there? Quickly call 112 and 119 here. Report that your friends are being attacked by a group of thugs, attacker." The friends were confused, not knowing why they had to say that, then hesitantly asked, "Oh, they were the ones being attacked." The boss on the other side looked at them and whispered, thinking that Get-On had warned him, if he failed now, not only the organization, but also his juniors would not consider him anything. Then, he put his hand inside his shirt, as if he was about to take out hot goods. That's right, he definitely pulled out a sharp knife. The ignorant Tyson was currently explaining to everyone that, "You see, what I was doing was just self-defense, hee, when suddenly that guy came at me with a knife, running and cursing, 'You son of a bitch.'" He rushed forward, shouting, "I will kill you, Jang Tyson." Tyson's friends saw this and panicked, screaming at him, "There's behind him, Tyson, quickly avoid him." The old thug was beaten to a pulp by Tyson, crying out in pain. Everyone still couldn't recover and called out Tyson's name, Tyson. With just a few basic moves, he kicked down the thug, who lay clutching his arms and screaming miserably. He was extremely confused but could only ask himself, who you really are. As for Tyson, he doesn't care how much he screams, and continues to preach the law and warn him, causing injuries from intentional murder, organized violence, and serious assault. That's all, the crime is enough to put you in jail for several years. The other guy heard that and cried, "What the hell, Jang Tyson?" Very soon Tyson contacted the lawyer. He complained that, "Lawyer Joe, I was assaulted by a group of people, they also intended to kill, please help me." Because he didn't want to go to jail, the boss of the thugs shed tears, admitted his mistake. Begged Tyson, I was wrong, please forgive me." At that moment he thought to himself, he is absolutely not a guy, easy to play. With his friendly face, he happily smiled and said, "Oh my gosh, look at that, hey, you understand your situation, that's good." At night, Tyson's news was stolen by a group of thugs and broadcasted everywhere in public places. On the screen, the host said, a group of students had gathered to form a gang and intended to kill an ordinary student. He was steadfast and said that the incident of mass assault by the above group of students raised a warning bell for the entire society. School violence was no longer confined to the boundaries of classrooms and schools, but also in society. The scene changes to a villa. Inside there is a sound of cursing. "What the hell have you guys done? Before the homeowner could finish watching the news, he became angry and frustrated, turned off the TV and cursed, "Damn, that's why he was investigated like this." The junior was scolded and quickly apologized. Apologizing to him. Having said that, he threw the controller straight at the junior's face. And cursed, "Shut up you idiot," he cried out in panic, "Oops." The homeowner was frustrated and shouted loudly. The news had already spread to television and all other media, it was impossible to control it anymore. At this time Tyson was leisurely watching the computer at the hospital. When suddenly his name was mentioned, that kid Jang Tyson was at the hospital. He continued, "The prosecutor also arrested those who pretended to be students, and those people were all his people." He gritted his teeth and cursed, "The policeman I bribed didn't contact me anymore, you bastards." He knew it was difficult to temporarily retreat, then he instructed his juniors to temporarily immobilize the soldiers and teach them to me, "If you guys make another mistake, don't blame me." Having said that, the other guy poured wine for the boss and said, "Yes sir." He drank the entire glass of wine and said, "It's good to know." Then he turned around and asked, "How was that glass of wine?" The other guy was a bit startled. Suddenly, something ran through the villa door. He quickly reacted and said loudly, "Pooh, pooh." Seeing no one out there, he felt confused and thought, there was no one. Before anyone could react, the electricity in the villa was turned off. The two people in the house were even more frightened and screamed, "What the hell, it seems like the electricity is malfunctioning," the junior replied. The junior then pulled out the knife, trembled and shouted, "Who are you? Come out quickly." As soon as he finished speaking, a stone flew in from somewhere at a very fast speed. The stone with a very strong force hit the junior man in the face, causing him to fall over and cry out. When the old man saw that person, he became bitter and cursed, "This bastard." It was a person wearing a black robe, looking very mysterious. That person gradually approached the old man. That guy was so scared that he was sweating and trembling and cried out, You. That mysterious person somehow got inside the house, the moonlight shining and could only see half of his face, making him unable to recognize anyone. The scene changes to night, pouring rain at the thug's house. Because a stranger suddenly broke in, the big brother suddenly asked, "Who are you?" The stranger was wearing a shirt with a wide hood that covered almost half of his face. It was completely impossible to recognize who he was. He replied to the big brother, "I am the god of death." Hearing that, the big brother frowned, grimaced and said, "What, you can't scare your father, you must have known who I was before you came here, do you want to die?" The angel of death also spoke loudly, saying, "You must pay the price for the sins you have committed." He continued, "Confess quickly, no one can help you." Hearing this, the big brother was a bit shy and asked, "What do you mean?" The boss was gradually losing patience, so he picked up a bottle of wine nearby and said, "You son of a bitch, I will kill you." He shouted, "I am prodigy," at the same time holding a bottle of wine and intending to throw it at the god of death. But unexpectedly, before he could move his hand, he was suddenly punched by the god of death, making it impossible for him to dodge. Being punched like that, he fell to the ground, with a bloody wound on his face. Surely that punch was not light, he was in pain but could only scream, coughing. He fell to the ground, still screaming loudly. The big brother now only knows how to cover his face, his mouth is bleeding, his jaw has lost a few teeth, he opens and closes his eyes and says, "You dare touch my face." He had been beaten like that, and he still spoke loudly. This time, the angel of death grabbed his neck directly, he just coughed. The angel of death hit the right side of the big brother's face, causing him to bleed and lose his teeth. Then hit him again on the left side of his face, causing him to lose another tooth. Park Dachel looked at the god of death's bloody hand and thought, "Mom, it's so strong, besides, it's scary." At this time the god of death said, "You have killed too many people." Park Dachel was beaten to a pulp, his eyes closed. He gasped and denied, "No, I didn't kill anyone." The god of death waved Park Dachel's bloody hand to threaten, he said, "Is that true?" Park Dachel was scared and raised his hands to defend himself. He replied, "I'm telling the truth, I didn't kill anyone." Suddenly, the angel of death put his hand on the big brother's head. He seemed not to understand, and even more so, he didn't know what the angel of death was planning to do. The god of death asked, "Can you hear these sounds?" Park Dachel was shocked and didn't know how to answer properly, so he remained silent without saying a word. The god of death continued to speak, "Those were the screams of pain and despair of the people you killed." Suddenly, behind the god of death, many dead people appeared running around. Those people were surprised to see Park Dachel here. They looked at Park Dachel with eyes full of hatred. Seeing Park Dachel here, they rushed in with all the hatred and resentment they had for so long. The number of dead people appears more and more. They are waiting behind the god of death to tear apart Park Dachel. They reached out and touched Park Dachel's body as if they wanted to tear him apart. He looked at the group of dead people touching him with skeptical eyes. Park Dachel said, What the hell?" The dead people showed extremely scary faces and said, "It was you killed me, give me back my life." They started to get stronger, maybe even trying to grab his head, saying, Park Dachel, you kill me." The Angel of Death withdrew his hand from Park Dachel's head. It turned out that just now it was just an illusion created by the Angel of Death. Now he doesn't know what is real and what is false. After a while, Park Dachel returned to his senses, not saying a word. Death asked, "Why, do you remember now?" Park Dachel really doesn't know what to do, but he still speaks loudly, "What is this? It's like a hallucination. You bought medicine here, I almost got scammed." His face was frozen. The two looked at each other not knowing what to say. At this moment, the God of Death said, "What you just saw are the souls of the people who were brutally murdered by you, and you forced me to do it." The God of Death placed his hand on Park Dachel's forehead again. He said, "Are you trying to trick me again?" Before he could finish his sentence, the images of the dead people from earlier appeared again. Even more ferocious than before. They all jumped on Park Dachel. He was so scared that his mouth opened wide and couldn't close. The crowd rushed at him as if they were tearing him apart. Some grabbed his head, some grabbed his hands and feet, making him scream loudly in fear. He was helpless, scared, didn't know what to do. He could only close his eyes tightly and scream. Park Dachel's scream echoed throughout the house, even outside could be heard. After a while of screaming, Park Dachel's expression couldn't hide his shock. He gasped and realized he had returned to reality. Park Dachel lay on the floor, his mouth still unable to close. The God of Death standing next to him said, "Is it painful? You have never experienced this pain, right?" Death continued asking, "Have you felt the pain and despair of the people you killed?" Park Dachel frowned, replied forcefully, "Feeling the fuck." Hearing that, the Angel of Death raised his hand and said, "People like you do not deserve to live. However, before you die, you must pay the price for your sins." Hearing the God of Death say that, Park Dachel immediately changed his state, from anger to fear. Seeing that the Angel of Death's hand was about to touch his forehead again, Park Dachel waved his arms and legs, saying, "No, stop, please, let me go, please." The God of Death gave Park Dachel a chance to tell the truth. "So tell me, how many people have you killed?" Park Dachel's eyes were filled with doubt. He thought to himself, "Is this really the God of Death?" The bloodstains on his mouth had not yet dried. He gritted his teeth. He had just seen a ghost with his own eyes. It was probably the God of Death. He stammered in response to the God of Death's question just now, 9 people. Death said, 10 people, including the first time you killed someone." The God of Death continued, "Have you forgotten that girl in high school wearing the uniform that year?" Suddenly the soul of that girl appeared, scaring Park Dachel's face. That female student opened her mouth looking very strange and exclaimed, "Park Dachel." The last sentence made him extremely scared. He opened his mouth and shouted loudly. Park Dachel silently said, "That is the murder case that I wanted to cover up from 30 years ago. I raped and killed the female student I liked." Suddenly, the Angel of Death threw the tape recorder down in front of Park Dachel, telling him to confess. "Confess all the crimes you have committed, then you can pay for all your sins." Holding the tape recorder in your hand, Park Dachel replied, "I understand, I will confess." Death continued, "There was one more thing." Hearing that, Park Dachel quickly looked up to see what it was. The God of Death told Park Dachel to confess to Hong Jang-hyuk too, otherwise your family will have to endure the same pain. Park Dachel muttered dissatisfiedly, "What a devil." Park Dachel crouched down and bowed his head, accepting the invitation. Okay. Outside, it was still pouring rain like when the Angel of Death had just appeared. Scene changes to a clear blue sky morning at the hospital. People were buzzing and talking endlessly. Some people said, "Oh my god, I heard they found a few bodies hanging from that dam, including the body of a female student who was killed 30 years ago. Someone else responded, "Really?" The scene changes again to room 501 in the hospital. On the table is the shirt with a wide hood that the God of Death was wearing earlier. The gossip is still loud outside. People say everything originates from Hong Jang-hyuk. On the bed was Jang Tyson. He had to be hospitalized because of post-concussion symptoms. Jang Tyson was on the bed, covered with a blanket, lying trembling. It turned out that he remembered the scenes from before, scared and said, "Everything went smoothly, but why do I still see those ghosts?" The news about Park Dachel's surrender has spread throughout social networking sites. The media is also constantly updating information about the case. This case has been posted on the main news and journalists are competing to comment about it. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of today's debate is about the case of 10 innocent citizens killed by gangsters. Now we would like to start with the details. The case was not only committed within the boundaries of Jiangsu City, and the government handled this matter too superficially. Not only the police but also the prosecutor took bribes from the gangsters, that this was also investigated and clarified. Another commentator continued, "What do you mean? Not only is it possible, there are also suspicions that politicians in the opposition are also involved in this case, so we need to conduct a thorough investigation." A woman in that group spoke up to defend politicians. "Don't insult politicians like that." The man sitting opposite objected, "I'm just telling the truth." The scene changes to the hospital. From inside the hospital, screams continuously ring out, making the entire hospital noisy. Inside the hospital room, Tyson was raising his hands in front of his face, looking at the tears falling down his face. Looking scared, he said to himself, "Why do I see ghosts? I have become a shaman too, so what?" Wait a minute, Tyson suddenly thought of an old man. He was startled, so he was also a ghost. "I died and he helped me go back to the past and live like this. Ah, it's so troublesome, I just have to rest first." He consoled himself that it's okay, Tyson, everything will be fine, after saying that he calmly lay down on the blanket and took a nap. But not long after he fell asleep, he had a nightmare, with ghosts continuously coming back to haunt his mind. He was scared and cried out for Mom, "Please help me." His screams shook the entire hospital and echoed into other rooms, causing people passing by his room to jump. Tyson is so afraid of demons attacking him that he always has to hold his hands in front of his face to defend, while his mouth continues to curse, "Fuck him too, there are so many dead people in this hospital, why, but these ghosts keep haunting me." Suddenly, a cry came from outside the door of Tyson's hospital room, startling him. Looking through the window, Tyson saw a shadow appear, his mouth trembling as he said it was a ghost. "Mom, help, save me." The door slowly opened, revealing the appearance of a woman. Seeing Tyson sitting on the hospital bed, the girl quickly rushed towards him and hugged him, crying, "Tyson, brother, hoo-hoo. Do you know how worried I am about you? I thought I wouldn't be able to see you again, huh?" Tyson also hugged the crying girl, Shiroyan. "Ah, but I'm still supposed to be at school right now. Why did I go to the hospital?" Syrian cried while answering, "I haven't taken the exam yet. What's the point of studying? Even if I study a lot, I can't become a star." Hearing the girl's words, Tyson was startled and stared at the girl with wide eyes, but still gently comforted her so she could calm down. Okay, I know." The girl still tried to hold Tyson tightly because her fear of him losing consciousness had not yet ended. She looked up at Tyson and asked with a wry expression, "Honey, are you still in pain?" Tyson hesitantly said, "No, I'm fine." Syrian put her hand on Tyson's forehead to see how his wound was. The slender and soft hand of a teenage girl made this guy fall in love. Her hand was so soft. Syrian's hands touched Tyson's face and nose. After seeing that there were no injuries or problems, she was happy. Luckily he didn't have a fever, but Syrian's actions seemed a bit too intimate, which made Tyson was shy and unfamiliar. He felt like this atmosphere was a bit awkward. Suddenly, Tyson's eyes changed and focused on her chest, probably because the distance between the two of them was too close. Tyson looked at his round eyes and then froze as if he didn't know what was about to happen. Syrian's soft hands were resting on his cheeks. These emotions were truly indescribable. Tyson's eyes still didn't move. I thought in my head that it was too dangerous. His face was covered in sweat and his mind was thinking, "Tyson, this girl likes you, why are you hesitating?" Syrian also seemed to understand what Tyson was thinking, so her face was a bit shy, but looking at her face, she seemed to be enjoying it. Without letting Tyson say anything else, Syrian closed her eyes tightly, moving her face and body closer to Tyson. Seeing this, Tyson panicked and sweated profusely, not expecting this girl to be this strong, but maybe he was still shy so he spoke quickly. "Wait a minute, Syrian." Syrian still remained in the same state as Tyson approached, but Tyson was now very confused, thinking about the person he secretly loved, but he already had a crush on Yane. But this girl looks so pretty. Suddenly, outside the door, there was a familiar-looking figure approaching and preparing to open the door of Tyson's hospital room. Inside, the two of them were also in a face-to-face, lip-to-lip position. Tyson was hesitant in his mind, but kissing in this atmosphere wasn't too bad. "But Mom, what should I do now?" "Well, when the time comes, come now." After that, Tyson also closed his eyes and slowly moved his lips towards Syrian. The distance was only 2 centimeters away. Suddenly the door opened and Yaren walked in, but seeing the scene before her eyes made her freeze for 5 seconds. She couldn't expect Tyson to be like this, she screamed. "What are you two doing?" Tyson saw that the person he liked saw this scene, so he quickly pushed Rio aside and ran back to Yaren while calling Yaren as if he wanted to explain what he was doing. He looked at his Yaren sister and then pointed to her eyes to defend herself. "Sister, why are you here?" "Something flew into my eyes so I asked her to help me blow it out." Yaren stared at Tyson, her eyes seemed a bit wet, then she stammered and said, "I thought you were injured but you look like you were still healthy. I came because I was worried about you." Syrian stood aside shyly, not daring to say anything while Tyson was crying as if he was about to cry. His appearance and expression seemed to be very regretful for the actions he had taken. He mumbled to himself, "How similar, it's like I'm being caught jealous." "My mouth stutters, I understand." Syrian was mad because Yaren had ruined the romantic scene she had longed for, but she couldn't do anything but gritted her teeth, clenched her fists, and walked away. Stepping out, the two of them faced each other, but looking at the eyes of these two ladies, it was enough to know that they didn't like her at all, and it was probably because of a man, but on the outside, they still had to act normal and nothing. Syrian spoke to greet the other person first, showing respect to both superiors and subordinates. "Hello sister," but in her heart, she considered this older sister as a thorn in her eye that she couldn't look away from. As for Yaren, she was no different. On the outside, she appeared to greet Syrian gently. But in her heart, she couldn't help but want to teach this girl a lesson to mark her sovereignty and know where to stop. Jan H. Tyson also seemed to understand something, seeing that the atmosphere was quite dense. So he had to resolve it himself. He came next to the two of them, put their arms around their shoulders, smiled and talked intimately, invited them to sit down. "Let me go get some water." Having finished speaking, he let the two sit down on the chair and then went to get 2 bottles of water and offered them. On the chair 2 girls were sitting and talking, but it seemed like the atmosphere was not very comfortable. Syrian quickly asked Yaren, "The university entrance exam is about to arrive, but the senior looks like she's free." Yaren also replied gently, but every sentence and every word made Syrian very difficult to hear. Tyson was injured, so no matter how busy he was, he had to come visit. Jang Tyson saw the 2 women talking to each other and secretly thought to himself, "Why do they keep smiling and glaring at each other? We need to change the atmosphere again." He walked over and sat with the 2 of them talking. "When have you been here, Syrian? You've already signed the contract, right?" Syrian heard that Tyson was interested in her and happily asked, "Wow, how did you know that?" "It seems like you pay a lot of attention to me." The words were in response to Tyson, but the tone was directed towards Yaren, probably with the aim of provoking this senior. Jang Tyson just smiled indifferently and continued to ask Yaren, "What about the senior? You just finished the midterm exam, right? Have the results come out yet?" Yaren happily turned to Tyson and replied, "You did your best. The thesis was the hardest part." Tyson said back, "Wow, what do you have to worry about? Your scores are always bad. I'm sure you'll pass." Yaren happily replied, "Is that true? I saw the 2 of them talking to each other happily, and it was very suitable for Syrian to sit next to her and be so angry that she could only frown to show her dislike but couldn't do anything." Tyson sat up and said loudly to cheer up Yaren's spirit, "She will definitely do it." Tianquan awkwardly thought to himself, "I just wanted to make the atmosphere less tense." But it seems that after the conversation just now, Tyson has made things worse, causing the 2 people's conflict to go even further. The 2 of them turned their faces in different directions. No one looked at the other and looked uncomfortable. They both told Tyson that they had finished drinking water, but with a harsher voice than before. Tyson saw that things were getting worse and was confused, not knowing what he had done wrong. Suddenly he made another plan. "I'm so hungry, let's go eat pizza. What do you think? What do you think?" Syrian coldly asked back, "Are you asking me?" and Yaren replied, "Just fine." Tyson was so happy that he cried and said, "You 2 wait outside for me, I have to go change clothes." The 2 people who heard that both pictured Tyson's muscular body in front of them. So Syrian quickly said, "Hyun, you should just change clothes in front of us." Yaren also said, "Yes Tyson, it's okay." Scene changed to the company. From the room the employee is asking the department manager, "Has the department manager looked at the profit rate yet?" He looked at the papers in front of him and replied, "Pilescene, then." Everyone kept saying, "That guy was a stock god or something, or a genius." I watched it all again, everything was perfect. All the money was spent, completely legal. This guy is amazing. The head of the department also said, "Yes, so you guys should be diligent to regain your honor." When the staff heard that, they were startled and asked, "Why?" The manager continued to say that an experienced stock trader like you guys is not even equal to a high school student. When the staff heard it, everyone looked dumbfounded and didn't understand what the manager meant. That's just a kid. On an early winter day, in the city, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall. The scene at this time was so beautiful that everyone ran out to see it and exclaimed, "Wow, it's snowing, so beautiful, go." At this time, Tyson's family was gathering together to watch the first snow of the season. Everyone was excited, Tyson's sister happily said. It was the first snow of the season. Tyson's father, even though he had experienced dozens of snow seasons, was no longer as excited as the children were when they saw the first snow of the season. He just smiled in surprise and said, "Snow." While Tyson's 2 younger sisters were playing in the snow, he noticed his father's thoughtful expression. He was surprised and called out, "Dad." Turns out, when he saw the snow falling, he immediately remembered the beautiful memories of when he was a soldier. He said, "Later, when you become a soldier, you will understand that, huh?" Even though Tyson had not yet gone through military service, he acted very understanding and calmly replied, "Oh, I know, they are no different from piles of white poop falling from the sky, he said while thinking of the scene of the soldier struggling to shovel snow. When he saw that you guessed correctly, he was surprised and asked, "Huh, you already knew?" Hearing that, he felt guilty and sprayed glue on the spot. To avoid revealing the secret, he shook his father and immediately changed the topic of the conversation. Tyson pretended to ask his father, "Our house is almost ready, right?" Making him helpless. Tyson's family's house is being rebuilt, expanding the area and renovating the inside, while still retaining the ancient look of a traditional house. His father just thought about the house and said, "Maybe next month you will be able to stay there." Suddenly, because she liked this place so much, his sister asked him, "Brother, will we be able to come here after high school?" Then Tyson replied, "Of course, this place is very close to Zhangzhou High School, you can walk there." His brother happily replied, "Really?" After watching the snow fall, everyone in the house sat at the table to enjoy fruit, and someone showed off their apple peeling skills, a very skillfully trimmed swan treading water. I also compliment you, the pond is so beautiful. It was so beautiful that her little daughter climbed up on the table to admire it and asked, "How did you cut it like that?" The complimented mother didn't say anything, just smiled confidently, and his fingers nimbly trimmed little by little. The father saw that the apples were of very good quality and immediately told the whole family that this batch of fruits absorbed a lot of sunlight and was more delicious thanks to natural nutrients. He thought the distributors would be very happy, like them. Tyson's father, thanks to growing clean apples, has now become a genuine organic farmer. Even the most demanding person, his mother, has to praise the deliciousness. The atmosphere was happy. Suddenly Tyson's mother mentioned about your work. Son, have you been writing well lately? When Tyson heard about writing, he panicked, silently blaming his mother. Why did she suddenly ask like that? Before he could finish his bite, he apologetically replied, "Of course, I've already submitted 20 manuscripts, haha." He seemed to make it up and said with a smile, the publishing side said everything was very profitable, huh? When the two kids heard that, they admired him and ran to compliment him. "You're so good, I'll give you a massage." The mother, who did not know that he made money from buying stocks, still happily told the children to bother him and said, "Come on, stop bothering him, I will look younger, and then let's become Miss Korea." Suddenly he handed out an envelope. His younger brothers were surprised and asked, "What is it?" When they held the envelope in their hands, the children shouted happily, "It was 200,000 won, my brother was the best." That's right, having money is happiness. His parents also often ask about his money. They probably think he works very hard. The whole family is simply enjoying themselves. No one is greedy. He is happy to see his younger siblings happy. "My two younger siblings only had 200,000 won and were already so happy," he suddenly chuckled. Then the two ignorant children spoke up, "Brother, is this much? Having too much of anything will be boring. Material things are the same," he thought to himself. "Everyone is still the same. It's just me that has changed too much. My stock assets have reached 100 billion. Because the profits I earn are too huge, the stock company will list me as a suspect, which is also the stock spending I will work for in the future." Tyson then asked his mother. His mother gently asked, "What's wrong?" He told his mother that he wanted to travel abroad for a while. She was a little surprised and worried and said, "What, go abroad?" Then he explained, "You want to go here and there to find ideas for writing your own creek." The mother was not reassured and asked, "But am I going alone?" The boy replied, "Mom, I'm a grown man, there are no children left." The other two were also surprised and shouted loudly, "Why, my brother is going abroad, besides, it's really not like that." The two children seemed to have found gold and stood begging, "Big brother, take me alone. We will be coolies for you, and you too, let's go." Tyson flatly refused the two boys' offer. He said, "No, if you want to tempt me, just practice for a few more years, huh?" The mother was very concerned about her son. She asked again, "Do you have a family yet?" He seriously replied, "Yes, Mom." The mother was no better than the children, because she was worried about her child. She asked to go with him. His mother said, "Let's go with you." He was a bit surprised. His eyes widened and asked, "Oh, Mom also wants to go," while the rest of us behind us still eagerly wanted to go. His mother confidently explained, "Actually, she can speak English, Spanish, and Japanese." "I don't know why, haha." Not only Tyson, but all the kids were completely shocked. Tyson thought to himself, "Mom knows 4 languages, why isn't she speaking now?" When she saw everyone surprised, the mother shyly said, "Why are you so surprised? I graduated from Hong Kong University, ho ho." Mom knows 4 languages, he thought to himself. Seeing him stunned, his mother said, "I trust you, Mom, go have fun." Tyson blamed himself, saying, "I'm a child without knowing anything. I feel so embarrassed to ask." At this time, the father was very proud of his beautiful wife, complacently telling his children that we must thank you, because we were born so beautiful and intelligent. He inherited good genes from his wife, you know. The two children saw their father showing off, but they did not lose. They bravely criticized their father, saying that it wasn't his fault that we might be better than them. Both father and mother were helpless and exclaimed, "Oh my God, kids." Then they burst out laughing. "Ha ha, Dad is so stupid, ha." The mother didn't stop her and laughed along. "Ha ha, you guys were joking." Suddenly, Tyson's mother called out, "It's me," making his father turn in surprise. Quick as lightning, the mother hugged her husband tightly, saying comforting words. "I love you very much, hee. The children who witnessed the scene were a bit shy, just thinking in their heads but not daring to say it out loud. "We are still sitting here, you two don't sprinkle dog rice like that. I have goosebumps all over." "I love you too," the two girls said and hugged their father. Tyson sat aside and silently exclaimed, "Yes, this is the feeling." It felt great. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. The two children saw their older brother sitting absent-mindedly and scolded him, "Say something. What are you still doing there? Go ahead, why bother?" Then he was pushed up and said, "Okay. Did push him." Suddenly, in Tyson's subconscious he heard someone calling him. The boy cried many times. Then he slowly opened his eyes. A figure was reflected in his eyes. He was startled when he saw that person. "Are you awake?" that mysterious person asked him, and he backed away in panic and said, Someone. Unexpectedly, that mysterious person was an old man with white hair and beard. He greeted Tyson and said, "Nice to meet you, young man." He still hasn't recovered from his soul and still asks, "Who is he?" He looked sad and said, "When he heard you say that, sir, do I look that old?" Tyson saw that he kept acting mysterious and refused to introduce himself, so he shouted loudly. I asked him who he was. Even though he was older, the young man cursed and shouted at him. He angrily judged Nobita, the eldest man. "See, this kid is insolent." Tyson looked at the surroundings and was even more shocked than asked, "Moreover, where is this?" He introduced himself. "Don't be afraid, this is my house." "What, is this place like that?" He turned around and looked back, silently assessing. Feeling like Tyson despised this place, he loudly explained that because it was a bit lacking, it looked a bit shabby. "So what else do I have to learn?" you seriously asked him directly. He fell into contemplation and thought for a while. Then he started showing off his achievements. He said, "When I was alive, I was fluent in 20 languages. After listening, you just didn't understand anything, so you asked him again." What did he mean? "However, I still have 50 languages I haven't learned yet," he continued. Tyson saw that it had nothing to do with him and asked, "So what?" He smiled smugly as if he had some intention. Finally he introduced himself. He said, "I am a foreign language expert." Chris Barnsdale smiled with a rather gentle look, holding a fan in his hand, and said, "I am a foreign language expert. My name is Chris Barnsdale." He continued to talk about his own education level with quite a sense of pride. "When I was alive, I had mastered 21 languages as my mother tongue, and I was still in the process of acquiring another 50 other languages." Janktason frowned, his face clearly showing discomfort, and replied, "What are you talking about? I mean, you know every language in this world. Now tell me where this is." He replied in a calm tone, "This is my private house, because I don't have many points, so it's a bit shabby." The male lead was still sitting on the ground in surprise. "Private house, really?" Then he smiled meaningfully and said, "I know you are still lacking in foreign language. So I will help you." Chris Barnsdale began to analyze seriously. Language is formed based on the connection between people. Language is also culture, the foundation of relationships. Without language, people can achieve any great goal. Janktason looked at him with worried eyes and thought to himself, "I thought he was also a fairy, but he looked very different from the people before. What did he want from me?" He still humbly said that to learn a language, you must know one thing: how to do it. The male lead kept looking at him and wondering why he appeared in someone else's dream and gave such a long speech. Chris Barnsdale looked solemn. Learning a language in an academic way is a stupid thing. Because the essence of language is communication, he still listened without missing a word. Filled with doubt in his heart, I couldn't help but listen attentively. There was something really strange about the way he talked. Then he raised his glasses, smiled happily, and said, "The most important thing is to choose the right teacher." The male lead slowly stood up and replied, "I understand. Can I ask a question?" He thought in his heart, "How suspicious." He replied, "Just ask." The male lead's eyes seriously asked, "What should I do next?" He placed his hands on both sides of his hips and asked, "Don't tell me." He had an epiphany just to say that. Chris Barnsdale was startled and surprised by Janktason's question and secretly exclaimed, "Wow, this kid." Janktason observed his expression and thought, "He looks confused. Maybe this is the first time." He silently said in his heart that what he just did was wrong. "You shouldn't have revealed so much. Why would you tell me about that point? If because you don't have many points, you have to stay in a shabby place like this." Janktason smiled confidently and secretly guessed that I was the best choice. The male lead crossed his arms, looking smug, and asked, "You're not a fairy, right?" Chris Barnsdale was suddenly startled and replied loudly, confused, "Of course it was." You looked at his attitude just now and began to analyze it. He didn't have any confidence at all. It stirred up his ego a bit. He confusedly explained, "Don't pay attention to what I just said. I'm not angry." Janktason still had that calm, complacent look and asked, "But why do you talk so much?" He stammered in response, then." Chris Barnsdale's face was full of worry and some confusion as he said, "When I was alive, I only buried my head in studying, so I didn't do much good." Silently scolding him, this kid said he only asked one question, but he asked too many questions. He was still confused and explained, "If we had more money, we would have donated more." Still, the male lead calmly interrupted and asked, "What about fairy tales?" Chris Barnsdale couldn't hide his best friend's worried feelings, which were clearly visible on his face as he tried to answer, "I studied foreign languages very hard, so when I died I became a god. It's a special language to call," Janktason exclaimed in his heart. "Oh, special language." The male lead suddenly understood the problem. "Got it. To earn points he must have contributed something. If I dig something up, maybe there will be an extra bonus." He slightly raised his mouth and smiled faintly and asked, "This is your first time teaching?" "Right." Then he wondered in his mind, "But what is that point? Do I need to have it?" When Mr. Chris heard this, he seemed quite guilty and loudly reproached me, What do you mean? Why do you keep interrogating me like a fraud? Jang Tyson asked with a serious expression, have you registered to be crowned king? Did you suppress summoning me to earn more points? He was startled and exclaimed, yoke. Still with that look, the male lead continued asking, you also know that earning points is not easy, right? Chris Barnsdale gasped in surprise, how did you know? In panic, how did he know? He still stared at him with those serious eyes. Then he pursed his lips and remained silent for a moment. Chris Barnsdale looked down and sadly admitted, he was right, the karma points from the good deeds he did were very valuable. Jang Tyson was surprised and stunned when he heard the words, karma points, he speculated. Were the points earned for doing good deeds? The male protagonist began to remember the good deeds he had done. His ancestor also praised him highly when he sacrificed his life to save that child, and recently he also took action to clean up the scum. I took care of a local gang and brought peace to Django High. Furthermore, discovering his unjust death is no small achievement. He was still skeptical and asked, but why did he have to say so much? Jang Tyson smiled and said, you can't just sit around and eat a golden bull. Chris Barnsdale immediately denied, no, I never had that thought. The male lead walked towards him while he was slowly backing away and asked, so what have you been doing? He raised both of his hands to indicate that he was innocent and replied, I'm just introducing the theory, don't misunderstand me. The male lead's face suddenly changed, he smiled happily and said, can we have a relationship? Professor, he was surprised when the male lead called him that, Professor. You asked a question that hit Chris Barnsdale's heart, tell me honestly, how much do you need? When asked the right question, he hesitated for a long time without saying a sentence. That's it. Then he looked down shyly, embarrassed and worried and replied, 50%. Jang Tyson crossed his arms and continued asking, if you marry without my consent, it's against the law, right, mister? Chris replied, of course, that's why I'm talking to you properly. He wondered, what is 50%, damn it? The male lead thought and said, I will only give you 20%. Chris Barnsdale immediately objected strongly, no, that was too little. He said loudly, that's just enough to build a main hall and put gravel on the ground. You're so evil, at least let me plant more flowers. Hearing that, the male lead thought, is 30% okay? He frowned and replied, so call someone else, mister. Chris was surprised again, what, how do you know that? The male lead curled his mouth and smiled slightly, thinking, he would accept it and then run away, then he spoke up with a smug look, don't be so surprised, I'll call someone else, you know who I am. His eyes proudly said, I am his descendant. Chris Barnsdale was stunned and fell to the ground, looking at him in panic and exclaiming, you are. Looking at his appearance full of fear and panic made the male protagonist guess that the old man who revived me must be very powerful. If he knows 21 languages, then he can come here, I just wanted to detour a bit. Then Jang teased and showed a smiling face as if he had done a good job and said, so let me increase it a little, 25%, mister. Chris heard that and said, what? He walked over and put his arms around his shoulders, laughed loudly and said, oh my god, you gave me so much, you're so generous, that's what you're thinking, right? It's nothing. Chris Barnsdale was sweating and worried as he looked at the male lead, not daring to refute. Then he hesitated and stammered in response, thank you, Jang teased and happily replied. It's nothing, mwahaha. The male lead looked around and asked about another topic, but why does this place have such Chinese architecture? There are so many Korean-style palaces and houses. He naturally replied, well, I just like Chinese architecture. The next day, in the city, the employee's voice asked, how can I help you? Jang teased and replied, I came to meet the branch manager. The employee continued to ask, do you have an appointment? He replied, I don't have an appointment. When the employee heard this, he frowned and said, sorry, you can't meet the manager. Manager Steve Benson doesn't accept people without an appointment. The male lead smiled slightly and meaningfully. He slowly opened his briefcase and reached in to get something. The employee was bewildered and skeptical, why? The male lead winked and said, just read it and you'll know. Looking at that set of papers, she was filled with doubts. Was it a big business? She replied, yes. Jang teased and smiled and comforted me, just be confident. Then the confused employee told him, please wait a moment. The male lead replied, yes. He looked at the employee who was turning around to make a phone call. Then Jang teased and looked around and felt nostalgic, it's been a long time, I haven't been here. He smiled and thought, because this bank is very close to my securities company, so I often visit it. This feeling can only be experienced by reincarnated people. He smiled and said softly, it was strange. The employee from earlier approached and bowed, Mr. Benson, please come in. Then she guided the male lead to the place, this way, sir. In my friend's heart at this moment, I realized that every time I have this feeling of nostalgia, I realized that I have really returned to the past. I didn't expect that I could go so far. Jang teased and took a deep breath and reminded himself to calm down. Now he was on his way to meet the branch manager of Hong Kong Commercial Bank, which only welcomes directors of large companies. He raised his hand to adjust his sleeve, his face clearly showing confidence. There's nothing to be afraid of, Jank teased, and everything has just begun. Jank teased and took a deep breath and reminded himself to calm down. Now he was on his way to meet the branch manager of Hong Kong Commercial Bank, which only welcomes directors of large companies. Jank teased Ant's face clearly shows confidence. There's nothing to be afraid of, everything has just begun. Upon arrival, the branch manager greeted him politely. Hello, Mr. Jank. He politely introduced himself. I am the manager of this bank. My name is Stephen Benz. The male lead also bowed his head politely and replied, it's a pleasure to meet you. Sir Stephen, my name is Jank Tyson. The bank manager suddenly complimented him. Oh, your pronunciation is so good. Did you study abroad? Tyson thought to himself that the foreign language ability that Chris Barnsdale had imparted to him was truly effective. He calmly replied, no, I just self-study. Stephen exclaimed, wow, that's really admirable. He politely invited, please sit down. The male lead replied, okay. The bank employee brought tea. She spoke, Mr. Manager. He turned to look and said, the tea has arrived. The staff slowly approached and put the tea on the table. Manager Stephen happily asked if Mr. Tyson liked to drink tea. The male lead also politely replied, of course. Jank Tyson smiled naturally and said, I really like black tea. The manager looked at him with doubt in his heart. The young man was still young and liked black tea. It seemed like he knew he liked black tea. He slowly poured the tea into a cup and explained that black tea that is not cooked according to Rule 333 will not be delicious. Holding a cup of tea in his hand, he kept talking about it. 3 grams of tea, 3 minutes and 300 milliliters of water is the standard. Jank Tyson took a sip of tea and said with a satisfied expression on his face, it was indeed very fragrant. Stephen Benz looked at him with wonder in his heart. He looked so young yet he looked so relaxed. That maturity and courage did not suit his age at all. He hesitated and asked, Mr. Jank, please forgive me, how old are you? You look like you're a college student, right? The male lead calmly and confidently replied, in a month I will be a third-year student in high school. Both were extremely surprised. The staff member said in shock, high school. Manager Stephen gasped and exclaimed, no way. He quickly took out his citizen identification card and student card from his briefcase and placed it on the table. The two of them stared at the 2 cards on the table, extremely surprised and exclaiming in their hearts, oh my god, Mr. Stephen said, it's real. Jank Tyson dispelled that awkwardness and politely complimented, this tea is really delicious, I would like another cup. The manager held in his hand the document that he had just given to the receptionist and said, Mr. Jang, I have read your document. With these huge figures, I couldn't believe my eyes. The male lead's eyes filled with pride as he thought, of course, because the total stock account balance has reached more than 250 billion won. He picked up the cup of tea and looked at him and said, then I'll get to the point. His face immediately became serious and asked, what is the purpose of your coming to see me? You came to deposit funds. Jank Tyson put his teacup on the table and replied, no sir, just the opposite. He confidently said, I came to borrow money. When Mr. Stephen heard that, he was confused and surprised. What, you borrowed money? He calculated in his mind that HSBC Group, the parent company of Hong Kong Commercial Bank, had many subsidiaries, such as stock investment companies as well as banks. Jank Tyson said the reason, I want to open an investment corporation in Hong Kong, I want to use that account to borrow money from the bank. He thought to himself, if you want to play big, you must have their help. He panicked and asked further, but, do you own any corporations? The male lead calmly replied, not yet, but tomorrow I will fly to Hong Kong. Then he looked at him seriously and asked, Mr. Stephen, will you help me? The bank manager's face couldn't hide his surprise and disbelief. Has this person done business in many countries before? He doesn't look like a young man at all. But then he nodded in agreement. Yes, his employee sitting next to him couldn't help but be surprised by that answer. He smiled gently and said, because Mr. Tyson is a big customer. Stephen seriously asked, how much do you want to borrow? Your staff was worried and stopped you, manager. Jank Tyson looked confident in himself. Even though he was not that old, Stephen still treated him like a VIP guest. He sat with a solemn posture, his face showing seriousness, and replied, I will use my stock account as collateral. I want to borrow $1 million. When the two people heard the amount of money, they were shocked and exclaimed in unison. $1 million. The male lead looks confident and proud. Why are you two so surprised? This is just the beginning. In a Tao building, lawyer Joe showed the male lead a piece of paper and said, the business license has been approved. Then he reminded the male protagonist that teenagers have every right to start a business. But it is not an easy thing, Jank Tyson happily replied, lawyer Joe has worked hard. He expressed concern for you, but is that okay? You still have to go to school, didn't your parents say anything? Jank Tyson replied so that lawyer Joe could rest assured, recently, I achieved a perfect score in the mock exam and ranked first in the whole school. Then he thought in his head, to have a certificate with a seal, I also need to have consent from my parents. A corporation with an investment capital of 1 billion won can be established if accompanied by the certificate, family relationship certification, he happily said. I look forward to working with you in the future, Lawyer Zhou, you have already calculated. My parents will be responsible for household accounts, and Lawyer Zhou will be responsible for auditing. Lawyer Zhou praised the male lead, saying that a high school student founded a corporation with an investment of 1 billion won, he is very talented. He wondered and asked, your company name seems a bit strange, does it have any special meaning? L-O-R. The male lead also happily answered, it's nothing special, its meaning is royal legend. Lawyer Zhou was surprised, a royal legend. Then he worriedly asked, isn't that a bit ostentatious, why is the royal family here? Isn't everyone in this country from a royal family? Putting it like that doesn't make much sense. Jiang Tijin raised his hands to adjust his vest, his face showing pride as he said, actually. L-O-R stands for return to being a legend. Lawyer Zhou was surprised, why? The male lead's eyes were full of pride, thinking, returning to being a legend, returning to the legend. He reminded himself that he couldn't reveal to everyone that he was a regressor, he would soon be a legend. At night, from a high-rise building looking down at the beautiful city scene at this time, the male lead exclaimed in admiration, so many lights, so great. He held the fork in his mouth and excitedly wondered, what should he eat first? Jiang Tijin is happy to eat delicious food, but high school students can't drink alcohol. So instead of eating at a luxury restaurant. Then he turned to look at everyone around and smiled and said, eating buffet is much better. He reached out and opened the can of Coke. Happy pouring it into the cup. Enjoying it with joy. Then he raised his eyes and looked up. In front of Jiang Tijin's eyes, a girl suddenly appeared, she was carrying a white bag, wearing a black shirt with a striped skirt and black socks. The male lead looked intently and his face turned completely red. The girl stopped in front of him. Jiang Tijin still couldn't take his eyes off her, his nose was bleeding out, his mouth was open but he couldn't close it, his hand was still in the position of pouring soft drink into the cup, causing the water to spill out but he's still looking intently and admiring, Mom, it's so beautiful. That girl opened her mouth to call, CEO Jiang Tijin. An extremely beautiful girl with long hair tied in a ponytail was standing right in front of Jiang Tijin. The woman happily sitting in front of Tijin introduced herself, I am Yusera, I had an interview with lawyer Zhou Yuanda. Tijin looked at the girl in front of him and smiled, she was so beautiful, Yusera shyly replied, thank you. The CEO also looks very handsome. Tijin continued very comfortably, people often complimented me on looking younger than my age, Yusera saw him like that and hesitantly answered yes, Tijin was pleased with the thought, it's not just about looking, he's young, actually. After saying that, Tijin picked up the glass of wine in his hand and took a sip. Yusera didn't expect the interview location to be a buffet restaurant, so she felt a bit uncomfortable. Tijin didn't think so and naturally smiled and said, in my opinion, communicating at the dinner table will make it easier to become friends. The era of 4.0 technology is almost here and people need to change too, huh? The era of 4.0 technology. Yusera was surprised to hear him say that. Tijin knew he was being rude so he quickly explained, sometimes people need to change old habits, that's what I mean. Tijin quickly regained his composure and said, that's the company's criteria. Yusera was a bit confused but still replied, yes. After sitting and talking for a while, I still didn't see him mention the interview, so Yusera immediately mentioned it, so let's start the interview now. Tijin heard that and immediately refused. She can go to work tomorrow. Yusera couldn't believe she received such an answer, but you haven't looked at my profile yet. Tijin looked at her panicked expression and laughed loudly, she was recommended to me by lawyer Zhou Yuntai, that's enough. Why do I have to look at the profile, oh but. Seeing her so worried, Tijin added, there's not much to do right now. If you need a foreign language certificate, you can go to school now. Yusera still couldn't believe it after listening, why was it so easy, was it because the job was too simple, or was the salary too low? Tijin looked at the girl with a worried expression and sighed. Yusera looked straight into Tijin's eyes and said worriedly, tell me how much my salary is per year. It turned out that she was worried about this issue. Tijin smiled and replied that his annual salary is 70 million won, the company will provide 4 basic types of insurance. After hearing this, Yusera screamed loudly, shocking even the people sitting in the restaurant. What, 70 million won? The waiter passing by saw her screaming like that and immediately expressed his displeasure. Looking at her surprised look like that, Tijin thought she was dissatisfied with him saying so little. Yusera was surprised and quickly waved her hand and said, no, it's very different. After listening, Tijin added with satisfaction, there will be an additional bonus of 400% each year and other bonuses, there will also be a holiday bonus that will be given during the vacation. Yusera stammered, let me ask, are you running an entire corporation? Tyson froze when he heard her question. It seemed like the group was interested. Suddenly Tyson laughed loudly. No, what business are you doing? Tyson jokingly said, I'm a thief. This time it was Ysera's turn to be stunned by his words. A mysterious smile appeared on Tyson's lips. This thief would steal the whole world. In the airport lobby, the loudspeaker announced that Flight E603 was arriving in Hong Kong and the gate at Terminal 12 was closing. When Tyson walked outside, it was extremely crowded. They chatted with each other in Hong Kong very happily. Tyson smiled and thought to himself, so knowing many foreign languages is like this, just overnight, cheers for breaking the rules. Tyson suddenly remembered what the professor said, I think you lack foreign language skills and I will help you. Looking at the past posts book in my hand, it is Korean Airlines E603 first class cabin. Everyone in the airport saw Tyson not waiting in line and immediately expressed their attitude. What the hell, why doesn't he stand in line, who does he think he is? He's already in first class at such a young age, so cool, he's an idol, so handsome. The flight attendants, knowing that this was a high-ranking customer, respectfully said, Sir, the plane is about to take off here. We have available beefsteak, Korean food, and a list of wines for you to choose from. Tyson was quite embarrassed that this girl kept leaning close to his face. Oh, the flight attendant said dessert again, there will be bread, salad, and fruit. What kind of wine do you want? Tyson smiled shyly and replied, I don't drink alcohol, thank God I'm still a student. The flight attendant pouted slightly and gave him a small piece of paper, then. Tyson happily accepted it, yes. When he opened it, he was startled. It said you're really handsome, please call me when you're free. Oh my God, I can't have a peaceful day. After that, no one bothered him anymore and the plane gently took off. Hong Kong International Airport. Tyson walked down to look at everything in the lobby. Suddenly someone called out, CEO Zhang Tyson. The woman holds a sign that reads Zhang Tyson. Tyson came closer and said, oh yes. This woman wears red shoes. Extremely beautiful, making Tyson have to look at her. The woman's lovely voice interrupted my brother's look. I would like to introduce myself. I work for CEO Zhang's secretarial office, my name is Claire Lee. I represent HSBC Group here to welcome you. Tyson also smiled back, yes I'm Zhang Tyson, just call me Daniel Zhang. I will escort you as a VIP guest, have you had your meal yet? Sitting in the car Tyson happily said, I had a snack at the airport. Claire Lee ventured to ask the CEO if this was a venture capitalist. Or the third generation of the corporation. The car drove down the road accompanied by Tyson's voice, that's not it. My father is an organic apple farmer, oh, I also like organic apples. Tyson looked at her and said, if you have a chance to visit Korea, just contact me, I will take you to visit traditional houses and farms. Claire was extremely excited and said, can I come and play? Her eyes are so beautiful, Tyson silently exclaimed. Of course she is always welcome, and also full of charm. After practicing the 5 pearls Tai Chi, my outlook on life has become bolder and more courageous. The car carrying the two of them finally stopped, we arrived. The driver got out of the car and tilted it open for Tyson. He slowly got out of the car and looked at everything around him. Before his eyes was the headquarters of Hong Kong Commercial Bank. His face suddenly changed to become more sinister. Now it's time to extort money from the tiger's mouth. The person in charge of the investigation couldn't hide his surprise when he saw Tyson's report. It's amazing how young he is. Can this report be trusted? The blonde-haired man seriously affirmed, the legal team has confirmed it. The deep voice in the darkness makes people uneasy, his whole body is surrounded by darkness. There must be some reason to entrust such a large amount of money to a teenager. Could it be that he is secret heir, if not an investment genius? That a plus credit rating is not what an individual can have but a person who mortgages a stock account worth hundreds of billions to borrow $100 million. It is true that a supermortgage can be said to be a transaction with a high recovery rate. The department head at this time sees nothing to worry about. So I don't understand why the director is so worried, the profit rate is 15% per year. After listening, the director had to admit. Yes, it was a perfect profit but at the same time it was also very strict. Tyson stood in front of the commercial bank's headquarters and thought to himself. Finally arrived at the headquarters of Hong Kong Commercial Bank. Clara turned around to look at Tyson and said, let's go in, everyone is still waiting for you. Tyson happily replied, okay. As soon as the other man saw Tyson, his heart became even more tense. Even the director frowned when he saw him enter. Clara immediately spoke up and said, I've already picked up CEO Zhang. The director, according to protocol, immediately went to the door to welcome him to Hong Kong. I am Leo Stewart, Director of Financial Investment at HSBC. This person is Department Head Harry Lawrence. Tyson shook hands with the director and said, "It is an honor that you are all British aristocrats. My name is Daniel Zhang." Facing the teenager in front of him, Leo Stewart thought to himself. Standing under a giant financial corporation, he is still very calm. This person cannot be underestimated. Leo Stewart suddenly asked, "If you know about my family, are you studying abroad in the UK?" Tyson replied that I'm not an international student, I'm just interested in England. The Stewart family is very famous. Leo Stewart laughed loudly, so no wonder when I first heard the name CEO Zhang, I was very sympathetic. The director turned to Clara and said, "Let's talk privately." Clara, after listening, Clara respectfully replied, "Yes." Tyson looked sinisterly at the girl walking out. Leo Stewart is extremely comfortable chatting, let's have tea, CEO Daniel. Okay, to this day I still remember the smell of black tea at branch manager Stephen Benson's office. Can I have a cup please? Hearing that, the director immediately poured tea for him. CEO Daniel is the best Korean I've ever met. Tyson pulled back his shirt and said coldly, his pronunciation was very accurate and fluent, thank you. Harry Lawrence looked at him curiously, but I was curious. Tyson saw him hesitate like that and said, "Please just ask." Harry Lawrence is no longer wandering around anymore. Are you developing a new stock investment program? If so, I'm willing to spend a lot on royalties. Suddenly screams came from the office next door, making the two directors and department heads frown in confusion. At this time, Tyson stared at the two of them and said, "I just invested by instinct." Leo Stewart was startled by this sentence. What? Harry Lawrence was equally surprised. Instinctively. Yes, for some reason, every time I look at the map I know which one will increase. Like a favor from the gods. The two of them were both bewildered at this moment, no one would vote by instinct. What kind of divine grace? Very quickly, Leo Stewart returned to his normal appearance. Thank you very much for this mortgage document, you can use stocks to borrow money. In Hong Kong, all citizens 18 years of age and older will be allowed to own a corporation, member. Our bank will take care of that. Tyson said gratefully, "Thank you, I will never forget this kindness." Achieving his goal, Tyson secretly thought that profits from foreign investment would not be taxed because he had registered for domestic tax and could be completely exempted. I will use Hong Kong as an intermediate stop. I will open a business as a corporation in tax havens and the most secure Swiss bank accounts. If I go through a few steps, they won't be able to wait for me. Just like no one knows about the real owner of hot money. Leo Stewart said, "So. Funds will be transferred to the account the day after the group is established, what do you see?" Tyson smiled and said, "I agree." Leo Stewart gave the contract to Tyson and said, "So please sign this contract until then. You will be provided with a full range of legal and decisive administrative services including secretarial services." When we got outside, it was raining a little, Clara said, "It's raining." A pair of black shoes appeared, Tyson was holding an umbrella for the two of them. So I wanted to go for a walk. Clara contemplated the rain, winter rain reminded me of Chicago. Tyson asked her, "Did you live in America when you were young?" The two of them walked together in the rain, talking. "No, I went to college in the US, I studied business administration in Chicago." Tyson heard that and said, "Oh, so you are a Chicago student who supports neoliberalism." After hearing this, Clara's smile became even brighter. Her courage and passion burned for the results of capitalism's determination. Other than those things, I didn't care about anything else. Clara mustered up the courage to ask him, when I left the office. I saw his eyes change. Did something happen when I left? Tyson looked at her silently. Remember what I said earlier. Wait, director, I'm here to change the contract. Leo Stewart shouted, "What? The contract is already perfect." Harry Lawrence continued in surprise, the profit rate is 15%. Investing also has risks, so that rate is necessary. Tyson coldly said, "It's not that." Isn't that what happened? The director and department head looked at him in confusion. Tyson firmly said, "I want to increase the loan amount." Leo Stewart's face softened slightly and he asked, "How much do you want to increase?" Tyson chose to stay silent and didn't answer right away. After a while he said, $200 million, the interest is 20% for a period of 1 year. The two of them gasped in surprise at this moment, $200 million. 20%. Ah. Tyson put everything aside and told Clara that there is no sound that can stabilize a person's mind and body like the sound of afternoon rain. Clara also agreed, I especially like the sound of rain falling on the sea. The light turns red. The two of them stood together waiting in the rain. Tyson looked at the approaching motorbike in panic. Eh? The man shouted loudly, the brakes are broken, it's very dangerous, please stay away. Clara looked at the car rushing towards her and stood motionless in fear. There was no time to avoid it. Tyson quickly hugged her around to avoid worrying and asked if she was okay. Looking at the situation before her eyes, Clara trembled in fear. After watching for a while, I could breathe a sigh of relief. Today is the day to take Jang Tyson's driver's license test. The examiner announced that congratulations, candidate 47 had met the requirements. Jang Tyson held his driver's license, grinned, and said, "Great, now I can buy a sports car." The scene changes to a company, when the sky has darkened. Briefly, this is BMJ Investment Limited Liability Company, a company secretly established in Hong Kong. BMJ is the abbreviation, by Big Mountain J, is the English translation of Jang Tyson. There was a hand typing furiously on the keys. That person thought to himself that a company had just merged with a company in Latin America, it would take a long time for them to track him down. That person's eyes clearly showed tension, his eyes kept staring at the computer screen. That person thought to himself, from now on, I have to put all my heart and soul into it. It turned out that the person who was typing continuously all this time was Jang Tyson. Looking at the data appearing on the computer screen, he whispered, "These are investments that can turn millionaires into beggars overnight." His eyes were glued to the screen, not daring to blink, because if there were any errors in the data, he would have to exit the game immediately. Jang Tyson clicked continuously, muttering, "Paying the deposit." Jang Tyson thought to himself, "According to the plan, I will deposit $3,190 for each contract." Thinking about this, he smirked. The real deal is a contract of up to $47,850. Do company, Jang Tyson was secretly happy. In January of the year 2007, the domestic futures market reached its peak. From May, people began to access this market. Investment in raw materials, especially oil, becomes more exciting than ever. From then on, oil prices will increase like crazy. Jang Tyson's eyes became steadfast. He whispered, "People always say that the delayed delivery market is just a shadow of the spot market. We have to predict the flow of both delayed and spot delivery markets." Thinking about it, he started typing continuously, starting to predict the flow of the two markets. After checking the flow of the two markets, he was satisfied, smiled and said, "Great, the total investment amount used today is $47,850,000. Jang Tyson was surprised and happy to realize that the total spot investment was over $713 million. Jang Tyson finished arranging the documents and happily said, "That's enough for the Hong Kong company." He sat relaxed, put his hand on his chin and said, "Now let's move on to lore." More fun and more fun. Jang Tyson realized, suddenly the amount of money in his account had reached more than $750 billion. Jang Tyson moved the mouse and said, "Tomorrow." Just this click. His voice firmly said, "I will create a storm." Currently, Jang Tyson is sitting in a dark room. There's no one, no light, only the glimmer of light from the computer.